Hello everyone, and welcome to another Learning Sound and Synthesis Spotlight Series interview. I'm here today with Bruce Reinoso. Welcome, Bruce.
Hello, Sarah.
Hey. And today we're going to be talking about Bruce's experience learning modular synthesis and going through actually a really interesting pivot or transition in his musical practice, because as we'll hear in a minute, Bruce has been a musician for quite a long time and has a lifetime of musical experience. And also how he started to really unlock his unique creative compositional voice working with electronics, which led him to composing his first album, which is really exciting. So there's quite a journey to get through. But why don't we start off, first of all, welcoming all of you who are watching. Welcome. Thank you for tuning in. If you're watching live, leave a comment. Let me know that you're here. Say hello to me and Bruce. It's always nice to see people tuning in. If you're watching a replay, you can comment replay and let us know that you're watching after the fact, and we can say hi to you in the comments. And second of all, let's start with a little intro. Bruce, do you mind telling us a bit about, just in brief, who you are, what kind of music you make?
Well, so I make music using synthesizers primarily. And depending on who you ask, it could be that I'm writing contemporary synthesizer music. Or if you ask the people that make up genres for CDs, I apparently am writing soundtrack music. And but I have years and years of classical training, right? And that included piano, trombone, lots of composition, and I did have a course of study in film scoring. So to me it's fairly original. I think it's linear, and it's a mixture of classical and every once in a while rock and roll works its way in there, and just Perez like gestures, and so that's my short answer to your question.
So as someone who has so much of a background in classical music, orchestral music, film scoring, these are all things I can definitely relate to as my training first in classical trumpet playing. As you know, we're both brass players. Uh-oh, that's trouble. At what point and why did you start to say, I want to learn how to work with synthesizers in particular? I'm just curious about that.
Well, I was trying to remember that. And my first memory is from the Beatles album Revolver. And, Paul McCartney had purchased a Moog synthesizer for $400, which is, $1967. But, and then when I was doing graduate work at Duke, they had a synclavier.
Oh, cool.
And the only way you learned to do that was with manuals. And there were 3-inch loose leaf ring binder manuals. So I just sat there and I went through every page and did everything. And at that point I was, insanely into synthesizers. And then we got this thing called a Macintosh Plus computer, and I forget, there was a group of people in Boston who made an early sequencer program. So of course that was it. My whole master's thesis was written on this Mac Plus using the sequencing program and switching out floppy disks. So I just had a great love for it. I mean, the other thing, I guess, is all of the album, Who's Next? Pete Townsend had all kinds of synthesizer stuff on that. And somewhere in the mid-'70s, Morton Subotnick came to Carolina, and we had this new thing called an ARP sequencer. And we all sat in the room and geeked out for a couple of hours. So, there were just these instances along the way where they came into my life. And then, and then I found Ableton Live and all the plugins in that, and Logic and all the plugins in that. And then I thought, well, I really like playing a musical instrument I can touch with my hands. And so that led me to purchase Moog synthesizers and then make noise modules. And so here I am now. And primarily I make my music with those instruments.
Yeah, I always find it so interesting to just hear about, what catches someone's attention. I think a lot of people can probably relate to different parts of your story, right? Either getting access to some really inspiring instrument or hearing a record and just being like, what in the world is that sound? I want to know how to make that sound. I can definitely relate to all of those things. So you were self-taught. You were a diligent manual reader. And then at some point you decided to join my class learning sound and synthesis. Can you just share a little bit about what was going on at that point that made you want to do that?
Well, the specific point was I had purchased a small boat of make noise modules, a DPO and a Maths and a Optimix and a Woggle Bug and a Mimeophone. And I read all the manuals and still had no clue what they were doing. So, by just practicing and listening and rereading the manuals, I started to get some satisfactory results. But those manuals are not 3 loose leaf ring binders full of instructions. They have a lot more to the user to have to figure out. So I just knew that, being an autodidact wasn't going to work, that I couldn't be self-taught on this, or that I had self-taught as much as I could. And that I also had learned enough that I understood now that what it meant that my Moog matriarch was semi-modular.
Mm-hmm.
I then started to get a clue about, the filter module and the envelope modules. But again, all of it was self-taught. And suddenly popping up on my Facebook stream or something was this trumpet player that I heard play at Moog Fest in 2018 in a bar.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was you, obviously.
Right.
And, you just blew me away when I heard that. I mean, at that point, I'd been a professional musician and composer for 40 years. Right. And I heard it. I thought, oh, my God, she is so good. So then when your post appeared on my stream, I thought, well, I have to check this out. And I thought, I really need a systematic approach. I need someone who has thought about it and put in the time and the effort and come up with a course. And you did not disappoint. Your materials are fantastic. They really are. The course is fantastic. And the other thing that's really fantastic is you've created this whole community of people. Mm-hmm. And we can all interact with each other and learn with each other. And that's huge, because a lot of time we all spend, no matter what kind of instrument you play, we spend in a room by ourselves with the instrument, so
true.
It's good to get feedback from human beings.
Oh, it's so critical. It's so important. Being a musician is not just about knowing how to make the sound, right? It's about sharing perspectives, listening together, collaborating in some way. Even if that collaboration even if your work is still a solo endeavor, there's collaboration that can come in the way of idea generating and brainstorming and all of that kind of stuff. So I agree. It's so critical. And I'm so happy that you're part of the learning sound and synthesis community, Bruce, because you have always added so much to it and you continue to do that, which is so great. Okay. So you've mentioned a couple times needing, wanting a systematic approach, being a diligent manual reader. And this gets into one of the first things that I really wanted to get into with you, which is just your process as you were going through learning sound synthesis. But it's kind of bigger than even about that class. It's just sort of how you approach your musical practice and learning new things, which you're constantly doing. I've been working with you long enough to know that every day you wake up and you are like, okay, I'm going to make music and I'm going to learn something new, which I really admire. And a big part of that, from my perspective, has to do with embracing a kind of beginner's mindset in which you are always willing to learn. Even someone like yourself, who's been a professional musician for decades, who was very well self-taught before starting, the learning sound and synthesis class, for example, you still went in, and I would bet you didn't skip a video. Like, you went in at the beginning and you went step by step through everything, even though a lot of it was probably stuff that you already knew. So I'm just curious, does that resonate with you? Do you agree? Can you talk a little bit about like how you approach that whole process?
Absolutely. And you do know me well. I am methodical,
Yes.
put it mildly. Your course is really well laid out. The Learning Sound and Synthesis course is really well laid out in modules. And it goes from modules for people who are completely new to this. So I was watching those and I was hearing about types of synthesizers, and I was hearing about the history of electronic music and theremin and all of the people through the 20th century. But I went through all of those anyway, because, long time ago, I learned, even if you go to a seminar that you know about already, but if you listen, there's one thing in there you didn't know. And there may be a whole lot of things, right? And I wanted a systematic approach. And so I saw that you had the systematic approach, and the modules progress, and as you go deeper into the modules, everything builds on everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you really get down into some just really good methodical exploration of the different types of, Euro rack modules, or the kind of modules you might find in a semi-modular synthesizer. And, all along the way, there are listening examples and exercises, and there's a workbook, and I, being as old as I am, I printed it out and I hand wrote onto the workbook instead of typed into it. But I literally went through all of those things, and I went through all of your examples, and there are, and I suppose people could skip around and follow their heart and still learn all kinds of amazing things. But I approach things systematically and think it really makes sense, because they build, and in your modules, you go through a lot of, what do we call patches, I guess we call them, where you put low frequency oscillators and envelope generators and sequencers and logic modules. You put all that stuff together to teach and illustrate a point, and I would sit there and I would assemble the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And, brilliantly, you use VCV Rack, which is available to people free online, right? So, no one could afford to buy all those modules that are right there inside VCV. And then, for me, the really good thing was I had all these beautiful, I had a Moog Matriarch and a Model D and a subharmonicon and a DFAM, and I had all of these make noise modules. And then I could stare at those and see them actually. It's like your modules parted the fog a little bit and pulled back the curtains a little bit. And I was like, oh, I get it. When I choose a waveform in the modulation module of the Matriarch, that square wave is going to be gates, and the sawtooth is going to be triggers, or the triangle is going to be triggers. And all of a sudden, the whole world opened up to me, and I understood it. And now, the first thing I do is I have these 6-foot long cables, and I will patch everything from the Matriarch or the Moogs or the Make Noise into some mults, right? So then I can send it everywhere else, so that it's all playing together like an orchestra. So I wandered through that answer a little bit.
Oh, it's great. I mean, one of the things you said early on that I just want to echo, I want to make sure people hear this, so I'm going to say it again, and is you said, when you are in a seminar or any learning situation, and you've been through it, or you've learned, the topic already, there will always at least be one thing that you didn't know. And I just think that's it's simple, but it's so profound because it's true. And even if, in my experience, and what I've heard from a lot of my students, I've also experienced this myself many times, maybe it's not even a new piece of information, but it's something said in a new way that clicks. And that is powerful. Some of my biggest mind-opening revelations have come from hearing something that I thought I already understood, explained in a better, more precise way by someone at the right time, at the right place, and I was like, oh my gosh, now I actually understand, fill in the blank, envelope generators or whatever it might be. And so it's just this openness that you bring into everything you do, Bruce, that kind of puts you in that receptive state where you're ready to hear, you're ready to find that one thing you don't know, or you're ready to hear something in a new way explained to you to clarify. And I think that's really admirable. It's something that everyone would, anyone can really benefit from embracing more of.
Yeah. And when you get tired, when I get tired of being systematic and methodical and all the rest of it, I just patch something together and see where it goes.
Right.
It's okay to play too.
Oh my gosh, is it ever? In fact, it's so good. Yeah.
Just frolic,
Frolic.
So,
When you get tired of being systematic, it's time to frolic through your synthesizer fields.
there's a I practice law as a day gig, and there's a phrase in the law called frolic and detour, which is not related to what we're doing, but it sort of applies to this whole idea of stop being methodical and just
play.
Well, what does happen if I take the end of cycle output from the maths and put it into the control port on the Optimix? What does that do?
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. So you have to just play some too, because music is an art. Music is a form of human expression. And I guess, at the end of the day, with all that methodical work and practice and listening, I am so much more able to be expressive of my humanity now. You know what I mean? My music is breathing, and I'm not afraid to just let it breathe. And,
Yeah.
If something is a mistake, I do it 3 times and then it doesn't sound like a mistake, and it teaches me something else to do,
Oh,
So,
love that. That's so good. That's so good. If something is a mistake, do it 3 times. Get to know it. I love that. It reminds me of something that I once heard. I'm pretty sure I read actually that Pauline Oliveris wrote, which is if I encounter a sound I'm uncomfortable with, I listen to it again and again and again to understand why I am uncomfortable with it. Like, why is this unfamiliar to me? Why do I not like this sound? As opposed to just pushing it aside, I linger, I stay with it.
Yeah, no, and just randomly associated with what you just said. In one of your modules, there's a whole workbook of trying to use what you've learned so far in your ears to match these patches that you've created. And that was just brutally hard for me, right? When I first did it, and now I am 10% better. And to me, 10% is huge. I don't know. I'm 50% better. I don't know. But I am so much better now, having worked through the whole course, at having an idea of the sound I want or the sound I want to match, and know, well, that has to do with the attack portion of the envelope on the amplitude, or that's because I have the filter envelope kick in almost instantly on the amplitude filter envelope, but then I put a really fast decay in the amplitude, and all you get left with is the filter, and all of a sudden I have the sound of a violin bow at the frog.
Yeah.
Down by the part where the hand is.
Yeah.
So
your sound design is beautiful. Like, I have listened to a lot of your in progress things and sounds and pieces, and it's beautiful. Really. So, okay. Something else that you said that it's a really nice segue into kind of the next big thing I wanted to talk about. You mentioned that this systematic approach and this diligent kind of methodical way of working, which many people could feel is too restrictive. I could see that, like it's boring or it's not creative enough. You were talking about how having that foundation has kind of allowed you to express yourself in a way that feels even more lively and free. So it's interesting, right? It's like you follow the process and the path, and you're very methodical. You lay yourself a foundation, and then from there you can kind of go anywhere. So can you just talk a little bit more about that, and maybe how it's led you to the creation of your album? Because that's one of the big things. I know that you haven't released it yet, but it's very close to coming out. So
yeah, maybe, if I'm lucky, 8 weeks,
so exciting.
From mastering to, Spotify or whatever. But so you're a brass player. You know this. You have to practice long tones,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to practice lip slurs, and you have to practice scales. And you don't do that for the sake of playing long tones or scales. You do that because then when you want to play the instrument and be expressive and say something with it, the chops part of it, the technical part of it is down. It's inside you. It's integrated into you, right?
Right.
This is why this is the benefit of doing the exercises, even when they're worse than being bound and gagged in a metronome factory. You just do it, right? And then you can play, then you can express, then the music breathes and lives, right?
So it's such a good way of saying it. You don't practice those scales so that you can go on stage and play your scales. You practice them so that you have the fluency and facility to do whatever comes into your mind and heart in the moment. I actually never thought about that kind of connection over to, learning about these fundamental synthesis concepts, but it's spot on. Keep going.
So I'm trying to think about your question, and my mind wanders away and goes down various paths while I'm talking. So I know I'm supposed to end up with the new album in this process, and so technique. What was the middle part of your question? Do you remember?
Uh-oh, this is now.
Oh no. Well, I mean, all of those things, to make this music, I had to have something in my heart that wanted to come out, and then I needed to be able to make some instrument make what I wanted to come out, whether the instrument was a violin, a trumpet, or a make noise module, or a synthesizer, or a VCV rack, and it all comes together. If in your people don't have to know musical theory, and they don't have to be able to read notation, right? But all of the things that you learn come together in your music making, right? And so, when I write music, I am approaching it as a trained composer, and I'm also approaching it as someone trained with these instruments. So I know I open my DAW, I set up a project, I set up the tracks that I think I'm going to need, I set up the routing and the buses, right? I think about tempo, and I adjust, all the gain knobs down so I don't break the needle off in the red, and then I start thinking about, well, what goes here and what goes there, and I play and I record, and then it occurs to me something goes with that, and so I start playing that. And all of that's because I know what to make the instrument do because I practiced. And I know what I want to express because I practiced doing that. I practice playing. That's the play part. That's the learning to express. And then there's, you get back to the discipline. You sit down and you go back and you listen to what you want, and you cut out all the stuff that doesn't make you happy, and you're left with stuff that makes you happy. And then you figure out how it works together and how it balances, right? And then you have someone tell you that they can hear clicks at the start and stop of your audio regions. And so then you learn how to put fades on them so they don't click and pop. You don't have to know about frequency and what's bass and what's mid bass and what are low mid frequencies and what are high mid frequencies. I do. I have hearing aids, and I got some new hearing aids, and I went to the Metropolitan Opera in the movie theater, and the clarinet and the trumpet player were popping out at like 450 and 500 hertz. And I went back to the audiologist and said, you have got to attenuate that. Not everybody can do that, but I sit down and I know that I want some 1000 hertz, or I want some 12,000 hertz sizzle, and so, you practice and you listen, but it's a mixture of technique and listening and doing, and I'm wandering around in your answer, but this is how I composed, and then, it's really good if you can learn how to share it with people, and I wrote music. I built up a book of recorded compositions, as you know, that's 10 or 15 years deep before I shared any of it with anybody, and your forum provides me with a really safe place to share something. with other people who also are feeling like you do about it, and they're wanting to share, and they're wanting to get feedback, and they're wanting to, and they're willing to give feedback. And so, I mean, I remember the first thing I shared. It was a musical composition of my impressions of images sent back from the Mars rover of Jezero crater, and it was just still and cold, but full of light, and I was hugely intimidated to share that. And, I don't know if my palms sweat or my heart races or my throat closes up, but, waiting for people to give me feedback. And I had the same feeling when I just sent off the final mixes for my album, that I have sculpted every single second, literally, of those mixes. I still had that same feeling. But doing it, you get better at it. You get comfortable with it. You understand that it is not going to be the end of your life, and that people will actually care and listen and give you feedback. And the other thing that you teach in your course, which is hugely important, is how to ask for feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Ask people for feedback about specific things. If you ask a general question, you might get a general answer back, and it may be helpful, and it might not be helpful, and it's greatly appreciated. But if you can really say, in particular, how do you feel about the balance between the left channel and the right channel, in the second and third minutes of this, people will give you feedback about these things. So anyway, there's a rambling response.
It's so good. Bruce, you just said so many really great things. So thank you for your rambling response. I thought it was very coherent. In particular, hearing about your compositional process is fascinating, and kind of how you step through, coming up with an idea, making some sounds, playing, listening back, responding, deciding, okay, I want more of that. I want less of that. Let's rinse and repeat. That's really interesting to hear, and I think probably really helpful for a lot of people. And there is actually a question that I want to pull up from the chat about your compositional process. But before I do that, just so I don't lose my train of thought, I also want to comment on this whole idea of sharing and building the confidence in yourself to be uncomfortable and to share your work with others. It is so important, right? And I know that it's not something that you, clearly based on this story, it's not something that you've always just had, right?
Right.
Yeah. People might find that hard to believe. They'd be like, well, Bruce is this person who's been a musician for, years and is so trained and qualified and all of these things. People probably look at me and assume the same thing. They don't get nervous ever. They just share. And it's really important to know that that's not true.
Yep.
People have, it's normal to feel nervous about something when you've poured yourself into it, when it's a vulnerable thing and you're sharing with other people. That's normal. The most important thing is to not let it stop you from doing it, right?
That's exactly right. Whatever the camera is.
Yeah, do it anyway. Share anyway, because if you don't share, you're pretty much guaranteeing no one will ever hear your music. You won't be able to get feedback. You won't really be growing. If you do share, you never know how good it could be, right?
Absolutely. That is so true.
Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
is.
And I love the fact that you said you still get that nervous feeling even now.
Oh, yeah.
Because it doesn't really go away, but what changes is our ability to feel through it and to believe in ourselves and to say, you know what, I've felt this before. I've felt these sweaty palms and these butterflies. And I know that on the other side of this courageous act I'm about to take, awesome things are going to happen. Like I'll have my debut album out in the world that I can send to my friends and colleagues and family. I'm going to feel so proud. And then I'll work on my next album. And
That's
beyond.
exactly right. And I hope everyone who is thinking about doing this remembers that. That's huge.
Yeah. Let's pull up one question, if you're willing, from the chat about your compositional process. So here's someone who you may know, who's asking, when composing with electronics, do you not write out the score first, as you might do with an orchestral score?
So I'll answer the question, even though I know that person.
I'm sure other people might be
Yeah,
intrigued.
yeah. No, no, no. This is a highly trained musician asking this question, but a wonderful person too, by the way. But anyway, so I tend to start with a musical idea and a sound, and I perform, which is why I've got two instruments with keyboards, right? You know, I've got the matriarch and I've got the model B, and that's how I play it. Because you know, the trombone is a beautiful thing, but it's limiting when it comes to modular synthesis. But so I actually play it, right, with all of its imperfections, because I play piano like a composer. I play wrong notes, I play wrong rhythms, but I'm getting it out, and then I am recording a MIDI track,
Mhm.
right, and then I export the MIDI track to Sibelius, which is a music notation software application, and Sibelius will open up a musical score, musical notation score of what it thinks I just played. And of course, it's a deeply flawed piece of human creation. So what it thinks I played and what I thought I played are always different, but the real exciting stuff is in the difference. It's in the, I don't think I played that, but oh my God, that's so much better than what I played. So then I will take that and I'll make a MIDI clip out of that, put it back into my DAW, and then make my synthesizers play that. Whether it's the Moog synthesizers or I'm sending, you know, volt per octave data to a make noise oscillator or something, and I make them play this thing. And you know, there's this whirly flute sound. I can't remember where it is now, maybe in Europa or something in part of my album. And it's a really cool sound. It's totally an accident, but then I looked at it and I studied it as the musical score and I got an idea about it, and then I put it back into the DAW. So there's the answer to Todd's question is in and out and back.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to say, I think that it also speaks to what we were talking about earlier about this beginner's mind, this openness, the fact that as the person composing this music, you're looking at something going, that wasn't what I intended. And then you're not immediately going, and it sucks as a result. You're going, oh, how fascinating. That's actually really cool. Let's lean into that. Let's explore that deeper. Let's see where that could go. That is a beautiful example of approaching everything that you do with a beginner's mindset, that you know, methodical approach to studying and going through things you might already know, and that willingness to see an accident or a mistake or whatever it is in your process and actually realize that it has so much creative potential, and then you turn it into something intentional and thoughtful by reworking it and exploring it more.
And then save all of your work and print all of your stems and back them up on at least two drives.
That there, folks, is the golden advice. We could just, if that's all you get from this, which I know it won't be, save, back it up. Yeah, always. So Bruce, can you tell us a little bit about this album? Where I know it's coming soon. Can you give us like a teaser, couple words about it and how people can hear more?
Sure. So it started from the notion of, like, if you can imagine a composer making a tour of the solar system, outward bound, right? And stopping and orbiting around the Earth's moon and stopping orbiting around Mars's moons, and then stopping and orbiting around the moons, the 4 moons of Jupiter that Galileo discovered. And I stopped there because, you know, there are 3,000 moons in the solar system, and I just couldn't write that many pieces. And then it occurred to me that I had to write music as I went from one orbit to the next, right? So there are these transitions. So that it's called Starry Messenger. It's a title I got from the treatise that Galileo published when he discovered the moons of Jupiter. And I realized that you had to have this transition and a journey from each of those places. So that's the Starry Messenger. And then I thought, well, that's sort of like pictures at an exhibition. So these transitions are like promenades. And then I thought, well, so how do I make a theme and variation out of that? So anyway, I worked through all of that. So there's there's inspiration, and then there's thinking about it, an analytical part. And I tried to capture with each orbit around the moons a mishmash of what I read, right? Io is volcanic because it's so close to Jupiter that the gravity makes it volcanic. But what it made Galileo think of was shimmering red violets in a field that Gaia made for Io when Hera turned her into a bull, right? So that she would have something to eat. So, and then what does that music sound like? What does shimmering violets and volcanoes sound like? So none of it's programmatic, right? It springs from an inspiration, but at the end of the day, it's not programmatic music. It's maybe tone poems, or maybe it's the soundtrack for somebody's movie. Who knows? So, and then at the end of it, the last piece is also the last part of the variation on the transits, and it's called Transit Beyond. And it leaves the solar system, it leaves human perception, and goes out into the Kuiper belt and the Oort cloud and beyond. And then it disappears.
I love it. Okay. I don't know about all of you watching, but you should be very excited to listen to this record. I've gotten the pleasure of having a sneak peek and have heard it a few times, and I can say that it is beautiful, really beautiful.
Well,
and so
that's very kind. I appreciate it.
Well,
see right there's feedback.
It's a beautiful record. It's so clear how strong your vision has been throughout the creation of it, and the way that you're tying all of these conceptual, threads together in the creation of it really comes through. And it's a tremendous work, something that you should be very proud of. So how and when, roughly, I know you don't have an exact release date, but people can watch you here on Facebook. They can follow you other places to hear news.
Yeah. So as we get closer, the mixes are finished, but they're with the mastering engineer. And, so I'm going to wait until I hear the magic that the mastering engineer does it. But then I'll start posting some pieces. And if people just pay attention to my Instagram, which doesn't have much on it yet, and my Facebook, then it will pop up for them, and I may share some of the process. It'll all be short, little brief posts about it. There's on your YouTube channel, right? There's a creative immersion program showcase from last May. And if people would like to listen to it, their music of my friends who are on that is just fantastic. But also on that is something close to the final mix of the music for Phobos and Deimos, which are the moons of Mars. So it will be forthcoming. I might do something. I have this notion that I'm gonna make the Story Messenger in 60 seconds. And since there are 12 tracks, that will be 5 seconds of each one.
Okay.
And I'm just gonna release a little reel of
I love it.
Story Messenger in 60 seconds.
I love that. So I just wanted people to see this. Here is the Instagram handle for people. I hope I got that right.
Yep.
And you can go ahead and follow Bruce over there for news. Other people are asking for a link to the showcase, and I don't have that one right on hand, but I will follow up with it. It is on my YouTube channel. So to get you in the right direction, I will put a link here to my YouTube channel. Just posting now. Here is that link, and I will follow up with the specific link to that video, but it's called the Creative Electroacoustic Immersion Showcase. That's the name of the video. So you'll be able to find it there. And the last thing, while I'm just dropping links into the chat, I'm going to drop one more in here, which is for the Learning Sound and Synthesis waitlist. If you're watching this and you are resonating with this conversation, and you are maybe a composer or a performer or a lover of music and you want to be able to get deeper into electronic music, working with modular synths, working with semi-modulars, virtual synths, whatever it is that you might have around, and you want to deepen your sound design skills, maybe learn more about composing with electronics, how to play and make music with modular synthesizers, I want to invite you to check out my class, Learning Sound and Synthesis, which is what Bruce and I have been talking about. This class opens 2 times a year for enrollment, and the next round will be opening in the spring of 2024. So the best thing that you can do at this point is go to soundandsynthesis.com, jump on the wait list. That means that you are going to be the first notified as soon as the enrollment opens back up for the spring cohort. And it also means that you're going to get an entire extra training, which is my live performance with modular synths masterclass, completely for free when you enroll in Learning Sound and Synthesis, just for being on the wait list. So if that is interesting to you, the link is in the chat. It's also in the description above this video. It's also on the screen. So you can go ahead and hop over there. If you are listening and you are, wondering maybe, is that the right fit for me? Or what would I get out of the class? You can also send me a DM anytime or leave a comment, and I would be more than happy to chat with you, learn about your goals, and just help you, assess whether Learning Sound and Synthesis is the right next fit for you. So I want to wrap up by passing it back over to Bruce. Is there anything that you want to say? Any last parting words?
Yes. Thank you, Sarah. I got what I wanted and needed, which was a really wonderful program that let me learn how to use these instruments, and a community of people who I can share it with and learn from. And I just want to compliment you, and I'll just say you're wonderful and great and a superb music educator. So and all of that's genuine, and no one, and just for people listening, no one paid me to say that. It's true. So thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Bruce. I mean, that means a lot to me to hear. I am so sincerely happy that, you had a great experience inside of the class, and you have not only insanely upgraded your synthesis and sound design skills, but you are finding that confidence within yourself to share your music with the world, because more people need to hear your music. I'm so excited that they will. And I also know, I don't want to spill the beans, but I also know that Bruce is already working on album number 2. I will leave that one to you to share with people when you're ready. This is how it goes, folks. You jump in, you take that leap of courage, you realize it's okay, you realize you are capable, and before you know it, you've got that momentum, and you're making things all the time. A little bit of love from people in the chat. Looking forward to it. That is an album, I'm assuming related to the album. A little flame emoji, because why not? Okay, we'll wrap up here. We'll wrap up here for today. Thank you, Bruce, so much again for sharing your story and all of these amazing little nuggets of wisdom. And thanks for everyone who tuned in live. It's always great to have people joining. And we'll see you all next time.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. Be well.
Yep, you too. Bye for now, everyone.